Welcome back, everyone. We have heard a lot about grains, in particular wheat and corn, but we wanted to broaden out that discussion to some other soft commodities. And to help us do that, Sean Broderick and Rudy Martin are both back. Joining them is Tony Sagami, Asia specialist at Weiss Research and the editor of the Asia Stock Alert. Now, Tony, first up, I want to start with you. One commodity getting big play, of course, and has always gotten big play, I suppose, is soybeans in Asia. Talk about that market's future.
Well, soybeans is a lot more than just soy sauce, but there's also tofu, miso, edamame. Soybeans have always been one of the most important sources of protein for the Asian diet. That's especially true now because one thing you're seeing in China is that the middle class incomes are rising. And one of the very, very first things that people do when they go out of subsistence is increase their amount of protein. They want to eat better. And so soybeans is a prime beneficiary of that. And one of the very best companies to use to participate in that is called Bunge. It's the largest distributor of soybeans in the world and my #1 pick to profit from the soybean boom.
Okay, Rudy, your thoughts? Latin America, soybeans?
Well, when I think of soybeans, I think of Argentina, which is the largest exporter of soybeans in the world. The stock that I like in that market is Cresud, ticker symbol CRESY. I like the fact that obviously it has soybeans, corn, beef cattle, milk, a variety of other agricultural products. I like the fact that it owns land, real estate, that it actually develops from farmland to urban land, and it makes money on that. And finally, the most attractive part of it for long-term investors is a yield. And so I think CRESY is an interesting way to play the soybean and also the undervalued nature of the Argentine market.
Sean, any thoughts on the soybean?
Well, I certainly think that we'll be seeing much more demand for it out of Asia. We are seeing global weather that's impacting the soybean crop, so I think we could see some upward pressure on prices. Actually, we're seeing that across the grain market, where, I mean, there is increasing global demand. In fact, many people thought that the market would be slowing down this year. So a lot of planning actually wasn't done and stuff. But it turns out demand's coming back rip-roaring. I mean, the North American market may have slowed down, but the rest of the world isn't waiting. And so we're seeing tremendous demand from the emerging markets, and so soybean prices could go a lot higher from here.
One commodity that we use on a daily basis, but that doesn't get talked about very much, of course, is water. We're seeing some major changes in water availability across the globe. Sean, how is that going to play out for water and play in the market?
Well, it really is already a crisis. I mean, we've had these huge cities built in places where they just didn't have those big cities before, whether it's India, China, Cambodia, you name it. And there wasn't any real planning as to how much water they'd need for those. And at the same time, those people were eating better, just to going back to what Tony was saying. And when you eat more meat, I mean, that takes a lot more grain, but it also takes a tremendous amount more water to make the meat. So this isn't just a stagnant problem, to use a water pun, but it's something that's really accelerating. And it's a crisis now. It's going to get a lot worse. And I think it's something we're really going to see focus on over the next 10 years.
Tony, Asia's seen record growth, more so than any other time period in their history. How does that impact water?
You know, one of the consequences of all that growth and prosperity is pollution. The industrialization of China has resulted in about 80% of all their rivers and lakes are now polluted and not drinkable. You know, no matter what hotel I go to across China, they all have a little sign in the bathroom that says water not potable. And so clean water is a problem. But there's also opportunity in that because you have to clean that up. There's a company called Dew on Water. They make the valves, filtration systems, connectors that utilities need to deliver clean water. So that's a fantastic way to play that. But one of the things I think ties into what you said about the agricultural crops, when you look at a company that's exporter of food, what they really are exporting is also water. And so keep that in mind too.
Okay, Rudy, sugar is king in Brazil. Brazil, of course, being the world's largest producer of sugar. What's the market looking like for sugar coming out of Latin America?
Let me tie into that last comment about water. We have a drought situation in Brazil, and Brazil is a large exporter of coffee, orange juice, corn, sugar, and so what that means is that the prices for that are going to go up. That means it's going to impact the price of your morning cornflakes. It'll affect the price of your orange juice, even the price of your coffee on a daily basis. So, expect that drought condition in Brazil to have a dramatic impact this year on commodity prices across the board. In the case of sugar, we also have a situation where Brazil is the largest sugar producer, and that's having a huge impact there. Now, in that marketplace, my favorite little stock to play that way market in is a company called Cosan, ticker symbol CZZ. And the beauty of that stock is it's a leading sugar producer, but it's also a great play on the ethanol.
Sean, you like Cosan as well, right?
Yes, I used to have that in one of my portfolios, and it's certainly a great stock. It's had a nice little run, so you might want to wait before you enter, but it has a lot of potential, especially considering that Brazil may start exporting ethanol to the U.S. That opens up this whole North American market to them. But just to go back to what he had touched on, we're seeing a drought in Brazil that's probably going to get worse because of the La Nina weather effect, which there are these big global weather patterns, and La Nina usually makes Brazil and Argentina drier. That affects not only Brazil, but also Argentina, one of the world's largest exporters of soybeans, to go back to that, right? And so we're seeing this huge problem there that's probably going to get worse over the next year as La Nina plays out. Sugar, I mean, we recently saw a forecast for a bullish harvest in India, and, for a large harvest in India, which you think would hurt sugar prices. But, sugar kind of, wobbled a bit and then headed higher on the news. That is not the sign of a market that's ready to top. That's the sign of a market that's probably going to go higher.
Tony, back to Asia now. Pork, it's what's for dinner, right, in China?
Oh, I think people have a conception that Asians eat a lot of seafood, but when it comes to China, they eat a lot of pork. As a matter of fact, China consumes 60% of the world's pork. Everybody knows about the famous terracotta warriors. There are hundreds, thousands of soldiers and horses, but there are also 3,000 pigs that were buried in that pit also. So that gives you an idea how important pork is to the Chinese diet. That's the next step above soybeans for most Chinese. It's pork. And there's this company called Zhongping Inc. That is the largest pork producer in China and a fantastic way to profit from that demand for pork.
Sean?
Yeah, and in fact, I had Zhongping's symbol HOGS in my agriculture report last year. My subscribers made a ton of money on that, and that's an example of a company that's doing what it does very well in a fragmented market, and so it can continue to expand and expand. We see this in China a lot, where a really good company really has blue sky upside potential because so much is fragmented over there and they can really expand their business.
And I'd mention one thing that might surprise a lot of viewers is that Zhongping is traded on the NASDAQ, and there are over 100 Chinese stocks that are listed on the American stock exchanges. So you don't have to open an exotic trading account in China or the Philippines or Malaysia to take advantage of these Asian opportunities, or Brazilian for that, Latin American for that matter.
Let me chime in. I track hogs for my international service as well. It's up dramatically over the last couple of days, so I think it's a really relevant name to be thinking about.
Okay, from pigs to cows now. Paul Nelson is a blogger for the Farm Journal website AgWeb. He points out on his site that because of the dollar's decline, U.S. beef is now the lowest cost and highest quality product to the world export market. Now, Rudy, do you agree with that particular statement?
Well, I understand the concept of lower U.S. dollar means you get more exports out the door. But from my perspective, I'm still partial to Argentine asado, so Paul Nelson, good luck with your American beef. I'm sticking with my Argentine beef.
And just to build on that, I really prefer grass-fed Mexican beef because I'm down in Mexico all the time looking at mine. So highest quality can be argued. Low price, though, I mean the U.S. dollar for the past few months has been in a steady downtrend. It is overdue for a bounce, but that downtrend's probably going to continue, and that's going to make U.S. products like beef cheaper for the rest of the world to buy.
Okay, beef not a big play though in Asia, right?
No, despite what you might think about Kobe beef, beef is not a big part of the Asian diet. It's vegetables, fruit, soybeans, and then pork, then chicken, and lastly would be beef. So there's not a lot of Asian opportunity to play beef.
All right, gentlemen, a pleasure. Thank you so much all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. That's all the time we have now. And thanks again to Tony Sagami, Sean Broderick, Rudy Martin, and of course, Jen Amos. Now next, we're going to turn our attention back to the commodities that everyone has been talking about, precious metals. Can gold and silver continue their record-breaking rallies, or do platinum and palladium offer better opportunities for investors? As always, if you have any questions for our guests or suggestions for topics that you'd like us to cover, just email us here at weissmoneynetwork@weissinc.com. I'm Jamie Holmes, and now, Martin Weiss.
For the past decade, the governments of the United States and Western Europe have been waging a financial war on economic recession, economic bust, economic distress. And they dropped interest rates, they pumped in stimulus money, they bailed out banks. They did everything in the book and not in the book to prevent a decline. And in this decade, they're doing it again, especially with quantitative easing, their code word for running the money printing presses. Right now, Ben Bernanke is leading the charge with the biggest money pumping in the world. But he's definitely not alone. Despite all the talk about austerity in Western Europe, we see money printing in the UK, Ireland, and other countries over the other side. And despite the fact that Japan has already launched round after round of money printing, they've just launched another major round. So here you have countries all over the world competing to debase their currencies, and whether they like it or not, to drive investors into everything that can go up when paper currencies go down. Gold, silver, and the subject of today's discussion, agricultural commodities. Now, that's the investor demand. Meanwhile, in the emerging markets of the world, far from the primary centers of money printing, far from Western Europe, United States, and even Japan, we see rising consumer demand for commodities, again, especially in the agricultural commodities. This is a big long-term trend. But also remember what our experts said in our special edition of MAM TV here last week, when we released the results of the Weiss-Ogby National Poll. We told you that we see fiscal conservatives winning major victories in November. If we're on target, that could bring about a temporary rally in the dollar and a temporary correction in commodities. But we also told you that although the American people have lost faith in politics, they have not yet lost faith in the Federal Reserve. So in a power vacuum in Washington, if we have a gridlock in Congress or a tug of war between Congress and the administration, the Fed will wind up being more empowered to act and more empowered to print money, despite any shift to fiscal conservatism. Bottom line, according to our experts, any correction in gold and agricultural commodities could be a buying opportunity. Thank you for joining. This is Martin Weiss for Money and Markets TV. See you again at our regular time on Thursday.